Neutral is a place of no movement. It means you're not making progress towards the goals or the ideas that are really important to you. Welcome to Beyond Neutral, where we talk about what gets you stuck and how we can shift and navigate the road forward. As leaders, as professionals in our careers, or just balancing and creating the kind of life you desire. I'm your host, Paula Reed. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to today's episode of Beyond Neutral. So we are continuing our conversation about emotion and the gifts that emotion gives us and how we can experience the benefit of emotions without being derailed by them. So we've talked about joy and we talked about fear last week in last week's episode. So today I want to talk about anxiety, and anxiety is not the same as fear. Although people always talk about fear and anxiety together. They are actually separate emotions, and physiologically what happens to us is different, but there's no question anxiety and fear are very good friends and they like to travel together. So there is a connection between the two of them, but not always. And the similarity and the difference is fear is really a response, as I said in our last episode, to a perceived threat, but really an immediate perceived threat, right? Or a fairly imminent perceived threat in its purest form. That's what fear is. On the flip side, anxiety is more worry about a threat that has not yet happened or may never happen. Anxiety is also our body's response to stress, okay? And so physiologically, what is happening is similar when we're reacting to fear as when we're reacting to anxiety, in that the stress alarm goes off in our brains and our nervous system kind of kicks in and our blood pressure goes up. In fear, it goes up a lot. In anxiety, it goes up a little bit. But we start cranking out cortisol into our bloodstream. The difference is that in fear, often that kind of happens at a very heightened level, whereas with anxiety, it can be at a lower, more constant rate, okay? And so because of that, we may not always realize that's what's going on with us. If we're really not in tune to what's happening, a lot of us walk around. There's some statistic, they said 20% of Americans, or some research that I have done has indicated that 20% of Americans have anxiety, experience anxiety every day. I actually think that's probably an incredibly low number, because I think that on some level, way more people in this country experience anxiety on a fairly ongoing level. And a lot of times it's just there. It's just, you may not even be aware of it, but it's absolutely there. And anxiety can get triggered either because it can be situational, or it can be, as I said, more longer term, more chronic. So situational, think about it. You've got a deadline that's approaching. You're starting a new job. You're going into a big meeting and you're anxious about it. But in your body, the same exact things are happening. Your muscles are tensing up. You're feeling a little bit nervous. Your blood pressure's rising. So all of those same things are happening. And if you think about it, if you're experiencing that at a regular level and ongoing, the long-term physical effect of it can be tough, right? So how do we think about that? As I said, all of our emotions were created for a reason. They're there for a purpose, and they're there to give us information, okay? And the information that they're looking to offer us is a gift. And with all emotions, if they're experienced at the right level, they are a gift, okay? So the problem becomes if we're experiencing, in this case, anxiety at a regular level and at a super high rate and not really being able to take a break from that, then physically, emotionally, everything, it wears on us, right? And I would challenge anybody out there to say that they've never had that experience, because I think most of us have. The gift or the message that anxiety is trying to give us, what it's looking for, the gift of anxiety, is it's looking for clarity. So by that, I mean that fear, for example, is a directional emotion. When you think about fear in its purest sense, right, you see where it is. It's focused. What can happen with anxiety is it's not direct. It has no direction, right? And oftentimes what we're grappling with is like this. I look at this, it's like this giant ball of jello that you're trying to put your hands around. Or if you really are in an anxious state, sometimes you don't have clarity. You don't know where to go. You're not sure what to do. Think about the anxiety that's caused by just having too much work to do. When you think about that, almost the clarity it's looking for is priority, right? Or the clarity it's looking for is, when do I get a break from this? Where are the downtimes coming? But it's looking for information. And information is, in fact, the thing that can help alleviate anxiety. So how do you handle it? If you have, the first thing is, as I say about every single emotion, is number one, notice it. And notice what triggers it. So in situational anxiety, there's triggers, and often we know what they are. Sometimes public speaking gives people anxiety, right? Going into a big meeting or having to get ready and preparing for a big presentation gives you anxiety. And a lot of the anxiety is like, how am I going to do? Do I know everything? So the direction or the clarity that the emotion is looking for there is to really understand what's going to happen. That's what anxiety is looking for. So in a situational anxiety, one of the things that is really helpful is to sit down, realize that the trigger is, I'm going into this meeting. Am I going to have the answers when they ask them? And imagine in your brain that conversation. Think about what that conversation could look at. Think about the worst case. They're going to call on me. I'm not going to know. They're going to call on me. I'm going to say, here's the information. Okay. And I'm going to give it to them. Like in your mind's eye, go through the scenario and imagine how that scenario could potentially go one way or the other. And often once you've imagined that, you gain the clarity that you need to bring that anxiety level down a notch. And it's incredibly helpful to do that. Okay. So that's number one, if you're able to identify it as a situational trigger. And if you're able to even sit back and realize it may not just be one meeting that you're going into that's causing it, but you may start to realize as you start to notice where it's coming from, that there's a pattern to those things that are causing you anxiety. And once you see a pattern, you're able to anticipate ahead of an event how you're going to feel or how you might want to respond or how you want to respond differently. So once you can see a pattern, you can plan for that. And there's the clarity, right? That's what the emotion's looking for. So once you get the clarity, you can find your anxiety level coming down a bit. The other kind of anxiety, which can be just like, you don't even know where it's coming from. And I will hear clients, and I've certainly experienced this myself, where you're just like, I'm just anxious and I don't know where it's coming from. That big, what is this anxiety? Like, why am I feeling so overwhelmed? Once again, it's looking for clarity, okay? In that situation, and by the way, in the situational anxiety situation, there is absolutely research that indicates that one of the biggest ways to break the anxiety cycle, which is usually a ruminating cycle, is to do something tactile. So I remember my kids a couple of years ago, like fidget spinners were a big deal. That's the point of a fidget spinner. It's to be involved in something tactile to interrupt that pattern of thought process that's creating the anxiety, right? But there is tremendous evidence that anything that you do that's tactile, that you go and you work in a garden, knitting if you're a knitter, something with your hands that actually is some type of a physical process, can break that pattern. And once you break the pattern, you're able to breathe a little bit and step back and say, okay, what's going on here? Another way to handle the anxiety. But when you remember that the purpose of anxiety is to bring clarity, you also can realize that when you're in a cloud, that is in fact what you're experiencing. Okay. And you're looking for a prime example. If you're dealing with a really significant deadline and you just are suddenly feeling anxious. Okay. In your brain, you're like, I have so much work to do. I'm never going to get it done. Reframing that. Okay. So sitting down and breaking that spell and reframing that into, I have a lot of work to do. I need to set priorities. There's the clarity and the direction. Instead of being overwhelmed, instead of feeling like you don't have control, what are the things within that situation that you can control or that you need to control? I have a deadline. How do I set my priorities? What are the most important things? How long am I going to give to each one of those things in order to get to where I need to get to? And I also find that kind of thinking in those situations, thinking about where the light is at the end of the tunnel is incredibly helpful. I find that when I sometimes will look at on Sunday nights, I'm preparing for my week and I know it's going to be a hellish week. Like I look and there's so many things on my calendar. Like, how am I going to get to all of them? I find that one place where I have found a break, where I've scheduled in some type of reset activity, whether that's even just going out to dinner with a friend, whether that's working out, whatever that is. And I find that for me, the clarity in those situations that allows the anxiety to come down is clarifying how long that work intensity level is going to continue. And when I can get to the other side of that and I look at it and I go, okay, I know what this is going to be like from here until here, but then I get a pause. Automatically, my stress level comes down because I can put it into a package. I can put very specific parameters around this thing that was this big cloud of worry and stress. So that's something to think about as a way to manage that when it's kind of one of those longer term, less what I would call situational anxiety situations. Anxiety is a part of our society. I think everybody experiences at some time. Like all emotions, as I've said, there's a gift. The key is to find the gift, okay? To understand what it's looking to teach you and to then create a system by which you can receive that lesson and give to yourself what the emotion is looking for. So if you're experiencing anxiety, give to yourself clarity, direction. Trust me, it works. I'll tell you a funny story about long-term anxiety and the physical response in my own life. Many years ago, probably 8 years ago, my son was a senior in high school. He suffered a fairly significant concussion. He actually had a couple of them, but one was really a tough one. And it was right before Christmas that he got it. And he was actually out of school his senior year of high school for 3.5 months. So it was just like my anxiety over that was massive because he was home and he sitting at home and not doing anything. He was okay, but he really couldn't. Senior in high school, you want to be with your friends, you want to be in school, you want to be doing those things. He really couldn't do them. So there was a lot of kind of managing his emotion that then came on to the fact that I was incredibly anxious. And I didn't realize it in the moment, but I started to cook. And I didn't know then what I know now about why that was so soothing, okay? But I cooked so much food that winter. It's like a joke with my neighbors and friends of mine that you could not fit any more food in the refrigerator. I would come home from work and he would be there. And I grew up in a very large family of 7. My habit is to cook for a lot of people, even though I didn't have that large of a family myself. I had 2 kids and a husband at the time. But I would cook for 9 people consistently because that was the soothing mechanism I had in order to get through that anxiety period for myself. Our neighborhood ate chicken marsala, mulligatawny stew. I fed the neighborhood. It was like a joke that I would regularly call my girlfriend and go, "Did you guys eat yet? Because I've got chicken parmesan for 4 in the refrigerator that's left over from dinner if you guys want it." But unbeknownst to me, that was my way of interrupting that anxiety response that I had going on and cleared the way for me to just be with my son and give him what he needed in that and realize that this was just something that time was going to take care of. And while I didn't know when that was going to end, I knew eventually it was going to end and eventually he would be better. And when he did, and all is well. But it's just a lesson of sometimes you're responding to stressors in ways that you don't realize it. So think about that. Anyway, the lesson of today is Make chicken parmesan if you're really having a tough time. No, it's take the blessing that anxiety is trying to offer you, right? Take the gift that it's trying to give you. And with that, you will find your way out of it. Okay. And if you need help understanding this, or you want to talk about it more, always happy to discuss it with you. But emotions, they're there for a reason. They came to us for a reason. Okay. How do we use them? How do we benefit from their existence and not get derailed by them? That's the key. That's it for today. I hope you're having a great week and keep driving down that road. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us on this week's episode of Beyond Neutral. Make sure to visit our website, www.reidandco.com, for this week's show notes. That's reidnco.com. And if you found value in today's episode, I would really appreciate you giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, share it with a friend. Also, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. All of this helps to support the show. Thanks so much. Take care.